Meet me. Welcome back, boys, and it's time for kind of a guide video. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I'm starting to notice that a lot of my guides, I know you guys love them, but they're starting to get out of date because people are asking me about some of my recommendations, and this is a game that changes a lot, right? The meta changes a lot with buffs and new heroes, and it was really overdue for an update. So today's guide is going to be on what heroes you should build, or more specifically, what RGB heroes you should build. So let's get started. We're going to have 5 topics today. So topic number 1 is going to be an introduction, where I kind of give you some caveats and explanations for my logic. Topic number 2, we'll talk about fire heroes. Topic number 3, we're going to talk about water heroes. Topic number 4, we're going to talk about green or grass heroes. And topic number 5, we're just going to wrap it up. And for the purposes of this video, we're going to exclude MLs because pretty much every ML in the game is good, or the vast majority of them, and they're really hard to get. So it's not going to be very viable for newer players. Basically, if you manage to get one, build it. So I want to focus on RGB heroes because all of them should be pretty straightforward to get. Even if you have to wait for the banner, it's 100% as long as you're on the banner, right? So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so topic number 1 is going to be introduction. I kind of want to talk about kind of my guidelines so I don't get a bunch of hate comments. But basically, I've broken down each element into 3 categories, and they are must, maybe, and super maybe. And the thing about it is that it doesn't mean that one hero is better than the other, right? If I put it in must, it means that the hero is usable across a wide variety of content and a very safe thing to draft, maybe, because it works in a lot of teams. For example, Adventure Raz. The maybes are heroes that are also very strong, but they usually have a very defined role, and they're very strong at doing that role, but not really draftable in every situation. So Politis is an example of that. Very strong against like CR push teams, but if it's just all bruisers, probably not going to be too great. Whereas Araz you could bring to like everything. And the super maybes, a lot of those heroes will just be like cleave units and stuff, but basically they do well, but you have to have a very specific game plan. Like you can't just slot them into any team and have them work. Basically, you need to bring like an entire team of them together, which is why I'm saying they're kind of super maybes, because you're going to have to draft a team around those units. So if I don't mention the unit, again, it doesn't mean that they're horrible, but it means that they probably have much less use. They're hard to draft. They're not that strong overall. And foremost, they're very rarely seen. That's where I base a lot of my kind of reviews around. If a unit isn't being drafted despite all the play testing that all these players are doing, it's probably underperforming in some regard. So with that intro out of the way, let's get started onto the heroes. All right, so fire units, topic number 2. We're going to start with the musts, and then we're going to go down the list. So must-have heroes for fire. We're going to start with Adventure Raz, and this is going to be great for all of you because obviously he is a free unit, and there's no excuse not to build him. He is very good in PvE. He is very good in PvP. He's good in Guild Wars. He's okay in Arena. He's kind of slow, but okay in Arena. And in RTA, he is extremely strong right now. AoE defense buff plus defense break plus guaranteed dual attacks and strips. That is a home run kit. So if you don't have him built, you should absolutely build him. He's free, and he's one of the strongest knights in the game right now. So you have no excuse. He is draftable in all content. Absolutely build him. Another must is Lilius. Now, some people might fight me on this, especially with the RTA season last season where she wasn't drafted nearly as much as she was in prior seasons. I still think she's really strong. Full AoE cleanse plus guaranteed dual attacks plus a provoke with a sober that could ignore effect resist. I still think she's very strong and draftable in many situations. Again, the must-have heroes are heroes that work well in many situations. And on top of that, she's also very solid in PvE and usable in a lot of that content. So some people might disagree with me here. I still think Lilius is a top pick in many situations. Now, my last must pick is going to be kind of interesting because she was kind of not used all that much before, but you probably know who it is now, and it's Ravi. Ravi is just so strong right now in both Guild Wars with all the landies out there and RTA. In Arena, it's kind of slow. You probably won't use her in Arena, but in RTA, she is just such a strong pick, and she's a very common like 2-3 pick where she's strong enough where people feel comfortable drafting her relatively early. Her passive means that she is really hard hitting after 5 turns. She gets effectiveness too, so her stuns land. She basically has a built in Durandal. Her S3 is crazy. CR pushback plus a stun plus a lot of damage, and a lot of people run her on Sigurds for huge healing. And her S1 is also huge healing, and the Soul Burn means she can one-shot a lot of units in the game once she gets her stacks up. So she came back in a big way. To me, Ravi is a must pull if you don't have her built. And she's actually quite good in PvE as well because she has a lot of self-sustain. She's almost like a red fire ML Ken. So those are my 3 must-build fire units in my opinion. So now let's go into the maybes. So the maybes for me are Kayron. Now he used to be a must, but he's fallen off, but he's still very useful against certain drafts. The thing about Kayron is he's definitely not really an early pick anymore, but he's a very solid like 5 pick or possibly even a 4 or 5 pick. The main problem with Kayron is because there's just so many strips in this game now, like Briarwitch Asaria neuters him, Fairy Tail Tenebria neuters him, Cerise kind of dumpsters him, and all these heroes are very popular in the meta right now. So again, this is just kind of an example of the meta shifting. Kayron himself didn't change at all, right? But because of all the new heroes that came out that became popular, it kind of dumpsters old heroes sometimes and makes them not viable, even if they themselves haven't changed. But Kayron is still a solid, maybe still good to build, still works pretty well on Guild Wars defense sometimes. So yeah, he's a good addition to most people's kits. Where is she? Politis. We mentioned her before. Politis is a very strong hero. Again, she's a maybe because she's mainly strong against cleave teams. In a full-on bruiser comp, she's probably a waste of her slot. But against cleavers that are CR pushing team, absolute monster. So it's a very good counter hero to have built. Maybe don't put your best gear on her. Just get her geared enough where she's a viable counter, won't just die instantly. And she will be usable. The other one is Holiday Yafine. Not many people like her, but I still think she's a very solid Bassar counter. And I think the team she works well against are if they draft both like Bassar and like S10A or something. If you bring something like Lilius, S10A is still safe. Whereas with Holiday Yafine, I mean, she can't get hit by Bassar on the opener basically. And she'll cleanse and also have decent DPS. Some people build her very tanky, others build her kind of hard hitting. I've had Holiday Yafines hit me for enormous damage, so she does hit pretty hard if you have the gear for it. But again, you don't absolutely need her, but a good addition if you can afford to build her. And my last maybe is Acades. Not the most common draft in RTA, but I do see her picked. In Guild Wars, though, she's an absolute juggernaut. Especially with landies out there, like for example, like Acades, A-Raz, X is very popular against like the landy FCC defenses because especially like ML Ken or something. So Acades is a very strong hero overall, and she's a 4-star, easy to get. So if you're lacking in Soul Weavers, can't really go wrong with this. Super maybes, we're not really going to talk about them, but Cowrick, some people do like using Cowrick. Melissa is still very good against Riolet. Tenebria used to be popular. She's rarely used anymore, but I guess you could call her a super maybe. And Charlotte, some people do enjoy using Charlotte, but she has fallen off in a big way. Now, I know you guys are probably wondering, like, how could I mention a specific hero? Well, it's because it's really only a PvE hero, but obviously if you don't have Tama and you're struggling in PvE, Tamarin is a 50 out of 10 in PvE. So if you're struggling to progress, absolutely get Tamarin. She is the goddess of PvE, but in terms of PvP, doesn't really matter. You're not going to use her very often there. Tamisaria is essentially not usable in RTA, so maybe Arena still, but otherwise just focus on PvE with her, but she is god tier in PvE, so if you don't have her, absolutely get her. So I think those are the fire heroes. Let's move on. Topic number 3, water heroes. As always, we're going to start in order, so let's start with the musts. And the number 1 will be pretty easy, Crow. Crow is still a king. And last season near the end, with all the G-Purge teams running around, he became a very common draft. And he's just always solid. Like, his kit is not flashy, but with the AoE defense buff and the fact that he can one-shot stuff with his S3 and has a lot of damage mitigation with Aureus, he is just a mainstay in the Epic 7 world. He makes the list all the time. He has not gotten outdated. Landy with Guiding Light is kind of a threat to him, but still no big deal. The more damage he takes, the faster he one-shots someone. So Crow, if you don't have him, absolute must build. SSB. She is still a must-have. Some people say, like, oh, well, she has so many counters now, like Rowana and new Solitaria hero coming out, and Pavel, whatever. It doesn't matter. All that's really changed is how to build her. For PvP, most people just run her like 15k plus HP, 1500 plus defense, super tanky. The AoE defense breaks in her damage, still shuts down a lot of cleave teams. She's an absolute beast, and if you can't gear her that way, she crushes Wyvern too. Just put her on DPS gear. She is still a must-have. She's a limited, obviously, but I'm sure they'll rerun her every single year at least once. So definitely still a must-have unit. Now then, the theme with water units is going to be, they love water limiteds. So a lot of them are just going to be limiteds, but the next one is Fairy Tale Tenebria. She was a very, very common picked last season in RTA. If you ban out FCC, she's a real threat. I mean, a strip plus unable to be buffed and a provoke, like that is a monstrous kit. And when the counter can also defense break, and if you put on Seer Ren, do even more debuffs, she becomes pretty toxic to deal with. The one problem with her is obviously to use her consistently, you need to have some pretty decent speed gear with effectiveness on her. But if you can gear her, very strong right now. And the last one is Cerise, also a limited unit. Don't say much about her. She was kind of used on a limited basis, but still used by cleavers back then. But post-buff, with the guaranteed dual attacks and stuff, she has become just a very common, dominant pick. She does have counters, and I don't think she's broken or anything, but she is very strong right now, especially with G-Purge running around. Her Restrict is very solid, so definitely a very, very useful hero to have. Now the maybes. I was torn on this because I almost wanted to put her into a must, but it is true that last season, near the end of the season in RTA, she mostly fell off just because there's so many units that have true damage now, like LR Crowd, Blood Moon Haste, etc., Sage Ball, and also because, crit hit resistance never works when you need it to. But I still think she's very strong. The attack buff, the AoE attack buff, means that she's one of the most offensive Soul Weavers in the game. In PvE, she's still great. So I still think she's a very good unit to have in your kit. Unfortunately, yet another limited, I know, but not nearly as mandatory as she used to be. Same deal with Rose. A lot of people don't use Rose that much because, it's kind of a forte of people that have insane speed gear and build like 290 roses, 300 roses, and use her to push up a cleave team. I still think she's very strong, gear dependent. Yeah, you can obviously get by without having her built. I never built her, but the people that do have really strong roses do scare me, and I do end up banning her a lot if I do see her, so I still think she's pretty strong. Super maybes. Kisei. Some people, like high-rated people, are running very, very jacked Kiseis. I don't know how I feel about it. I have lost to Kiseis before. I feel like a lot of how I deal with her just depends on if Alexa's proc. So, because they're almost always on Alexa's, and they're like 280 plus speed. And it's like if they Alexas, sometimes they pop someone right away and it's like a real disaster. Other games they don't Alexas and doesn't really seem to do anything. But some top players do enjoy using her a lot. Elena, not that one, Elena. She's also super maybe, very strong against certain teams. Guild Wars offense against certain teams, she's like an auto win. So still very good, but kind of a niche hero. You don't always need her. I never built her, and I get along just fine. So again, a situational hero, but very good at her role. Dizzy used to be a must. She's fallen off in a big way. I gotta say, I never saw her drafted near the end of last season. Too many immunities and full cleanses and everything ruining her day nowadays. But, PvE, she carried me through a lot of Abyss floors, and she is still annoying to deal with if you like 5 pick her and for some reason you draft a team with 0 cleanses. So, still usable, I suppose. And the final one is, I'm so sad that I have to put her in Super maybe now. Angelic Montmorency. Like a year ago, I put her in the must pull. If you're an early game player, I still think she's worth investing into. If you're struggling to get a decent Soul Weaver, she's still top tier in PvE, an absolute juggernaut in that. But in PvP, she's just fallen off. There's too many other Soul Weavers that have better kits overall. And the only time you would really ever use her is if you wanted to build her extremely high effect resist and try to deal with control comps. Two problems with that is not many people are running full control anymore. And against full control, honestly, she can't debuff or cleanse enough anyway. And the other problem is there's too many full cleansers in the game now. Like, why bring a Momo when you can use like DJ Bassar or Delibet or something? So again, all these new heroes came out kind of just encroached on her role until she kind of just fell into the wayside. But she's a super maybe. If you're really struggling with heroes, you could still build her, but she has fallen off in a big way. And I think that's it for water heroes. The rest of them, I would say my PvE choice of the day would be Sigrid. If you're going to Wyvern, obviously you could build Sigrid. In PvP, largely useless. Some people use her with ALOS to deal with Arbiters. But again, Arbiter is not a big problem for anyone that's in the upper ranks, so no biggie there. And with that, let's move on. All right, so topic number 4, grass heroes again. Let's start with the musts. So the grass heroes were actually the hardest to do, but this one's going to be a mainstay forever. Bassar. He's been toxic forever, continues to be toxic to this day. A very common pick at RTA even now, even with things like Holiday, Athene, and Lilius and stuff. He can still shut down so many teams. He can carry Taga Hells, ignore effect resist, pushes him back, unable to be buffed, full cleanse. It'll just never get old. Bassar's a must pull for PvP. Don't even regret it, just get him. Number 2, Flurry. I actually built my Flurry, and I gotta say, I have a love-hate relationship with this hero because she has an obscene kit, a turn cycle so fast. With Justice for All, she can basically self-sustain herself forever. If your team doesn't have a lot of damage, she can solo you. Just a very strong unit. The only gripe I have with Flurry is that this 100% with the 15% never feels like 100% because it's separate chances for the strip, the decreased defense, and the provoke. It always feels like something doesn't land. And it's always against units that you know have 0 effect resist, like a Riolet or something. And it'll just get resisted and ruin your day. I had one RTA session where I drafted her 6 times in a row after regearing her, and she literally got resisted 6 times consecutively against DPS units, and I almost transmitted her. But regardless, she's an absolute beast, and you should absolutely build her because she's free. And my last must pull is, where is that little lady? Landy. Landy is just really strong right now. There are ways to deal with her, but the advent of Ravi alone shows how much people respect Landy. I mean, Ravi was strong even if Landy didn't exist, but still. But she can just solo teams with her S2 and her S3. And the fact that Guiding Light, like if Guiding Light didn't exist in the game, she probably wouldn't be anywhere near as good. But Guiding Light means that against certain teams, she's just safe. And a lot of games with her just comes down to does Guiding Light proc or not after the first turn. And if it does, sometimes like if you don't have an AoE comp, it's like an auto lose because Landy will chop down the tankiest teams with her S3. And the speed buff is an absolute massive thing as well. So Landy, very strong right now. Definitely a must build. Now, maybes. And there are a lot of maybes. And I was actually struggling to kind of put them between maybe and super maybe, but I made a best effort. So, starting with the maybes, Rowana. Not really draftable in every situation, but against SSB, obviously neuters it. But she's also very strong against things like F10A, Cerise teams. Like the heal from the dual attacks is very good. And I've drafted her even when there wasn't an SSB on the team. A lot of comps she works very well against, and she's very easy to gear. Vivian, I think she's a little less popular than she used to be, but don't underestimate her. Her flush still hits hard, and depending on the EE you use, you can use her as like a cleaver or like a cleanser and a team attack buff and immunity. Like, don't underestimate team-wide immunity buff. So, and she's also really good at one-shot hunt teams, so very solid build. Valencia used to be one of my favorite heroes. I'm sad that she fell off, but she's in the maybe section now. She's still very strong. The real problem with her is she struggles to apply pressure because against a lot of teams they just ignore her after she S3s, and without the mind's eye, her damage is hot garbage and she just sits there and doesn't do anything. And that's why a lot of people have kind of ignored her. But against certain comps, her S3 is still very strong if you really need a full strip, and defense buff is not to be understated. Celine, you don't really need to build this, but just good to have if for like the mid lower tiers where people are still running Oxalots a lot. It's like a must ban in many situations, so just something good to have in your kit. Another maybe is Destina. A lot of top tier players have her built for having a very high ER build. I think she's better than Delabette against controlled teams in many ways because she CR boosts the team by 15% per debuff. So against like F10A Cerise, she will literally give her entire team an extra turn and full heal them. And it's like a death sentence. If you're running full control, you need to ban Destina or you basically auto lose. Whereas something like Delabette, you can kind of apply the debuffs in a way and rotate out of her S3. Destina's stronger than her in that role, I believe. And now let's go to the super maybes. Um, Ray is kind of like Destina, except he applies immunity. So again, not really that needed, but if you're struggling with control comps, Ray is very good. Mui, if you have really godly gear, speed gear, she can be pretty scary. Because I remember one time they did the thing where she S3'd into the S2 and she basically single-handedly beat my team. Again, not many people are going to want to build this, but she's certainly not bad. Where's my boy? Pavel, some people like using him. He's very gear intensive, but some people do manage to build him like 260 speed and still able to one shot like an SSB quite easily. And the S2 hits very hard. My one gripe with him is you kind of need to figure out like if you get into a fight and they draft a Pavel, one way to deal with him is ban whatever Taga hells he's bringing because without the soul burn he can't S3 after, and he's much easier to deal with. And the final one, and this is probably the biggest demotion, is Charles. I mean, back in the day, I said this guy was a must pull. And this is one of the things that triggered this video because someone messaged me and said, hey, your video said Charles is a must pull. Should I build him now? And I had to say, probably not. Guild Wars defense, still think he's scary and works because the thing about Guild Wars defense is you want a lot of RNG, and who has more RNG than Mr. Charles? But he's just fallen off a lot. His counters are not reliable enough to really depend on him. If you want to build him tanky on counter, he's super slow. So, yeah, I mean, if he doesn't counter, he does nothing. If you build him faster on counter, he's super squishy and gets dumpstered by things like Ravi or true damage like LR Crow and Blood Moon Haste. He's just in a weird spot right now. Definitely not bad, but honestly, the only time I see him in RTA are some people like trolling with like Charles Acades build where they keep just trying to heal him. But other than that, I mean, like even like common things like Flurry and Visar shut him down, just not reliable anymore. But if you like our old grandpa God, then feel free to build him. But I'd say he fell way down the priority list from a year ago. And I think that's it for grass units. Obviously you could argue for things like Aseria in PvE, and some people actually do use her in PvP. But I think in terms of the other heroes, I pretty much never saw them in PvP. Kyrus PvE Juggernaut, obviously. I think everything else you can pretty much ignore. So I think that's it. Let's move on. All right, so let's wrap this up. Topic number 5, conclusion. Again, I want to reiterate that not being in this video doesn't mean that you can't use a hero or they're super hot garbage. It just means that for the most part, they're probably not too viable in high-end PvP. Like, I know a lot of heroes, like a lot of people, not heroes, always say, like, research your Kara, do her, she's so strong. Guys, I know a lot of you guys love her, she's just not that strong. Like, she's not used. So let's recap the must-have heroes, and you're going to see a common theme in that if you RTA often, you're going to run into these heroes a lot. So Crow, Cerise, F10A, SSB, Basar, Landy, Flurry, Adventurer Raz, Lilius, Ravi. Those were my musts, and those are all heroes you're going to run into all the time in RTA. You can argue that maybe Lilius is a little lesser on that list than some of the other ones, but she's still quite commonly picked. So, in terms of maybes, those are all situational heroes. In terms of super maybes, even more situational heroes. But if you're a new player wondering what heroes you should build to try and get into the competitive RTA scene, then I think those musts are absolute core components of that. And again, in the future, that might change as more heroes continue to come out and counter everything. But for now, it is what it is. So anyways, I hope this video helps some of you guys out. I will continue to do videos like this as I feel that my lists start to get outdated. So in the future, I'm going to put the year in the title to try and remind people that, hey, this video is super old, don't trust it. But we'll try and keep you updated. So anyways, thanks for watching. Best of luck to you guys who don't have these heroes on pulling for them and building them. And check out my hero reviews playlist if you want to know how to build them. And till next time, peace out, boys.